Hey bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to tell you about my spring TBR. For those of you who aren't familiar, TBR stands for To Be Read. And I do my TBRs a little bit differently than most people on BookTube. First of all, I do my TBRs seasonally instead of monthly. And on top of that, I also pick out way more books to put on my TBR than what I know I'm gonna read. Because I'm a little bit of a mood reader, I like having a pool of books to pick from rather than a strict list of books that I'm planning to read. I used to think I was a big mood reader, but doing these seasonal TBRs have shown me that I actually really like having some sort of plan when it comes to my reading, but still having the flexibility to pick and choose within my plan. So today I'm going to go over a list of 25 books that I am either currently reading or plan to read during March, April, and May. Before I go over this list, I like to touch base with how I did on my last TBR, because I have a goal of only allowing myself to read up to 3 books that are not on my TBR. So in the winter, which I consider to be December, January, and February, I read a total of 13 books and I DNF'd 1 book. And out of those 14 books, only 2 of them were not on my TBR. And I gotta say, they were both buddy reads. I think that's probably the hardest part about making seasonal plans, is that it's almost impossible to plan your buddy reads that far in advance. But that's the whole point of giving myself 3 freebies throughout the season, to allow a little bit of wiggle room for things like buddy reads. So the 2 books that I read that were not on my TBR were Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, the last book in the Mistborn trilogy, which honestly, this was probably an oversight on my part. I had The Well of Ascension on my TBR, and I should have thought to myself that within the next 3 months I would want to read the finale. And then the second one was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. I just read this one in February, and that was a buddy read with some of the World Hoppers crew. Alright, moving on to the books that I am currently reading. At the time of filming, I've actually already finished a book in March, and that book was The Gathering Storm by Robert Jordan, which was the 12th book in the Wheel of Time series. This was our What-Along or Wheel of Time read-along book for February, but the live show was on the 2nd or the 3rd, and I finished it the day of the live show because I am a huge procrastinator. I'm also currently reading Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse, which is the first book in the 6th World series. This is an adult, I think it's adult, urban fantasy, but also kind of a dystopian because it's set in the future United States. There's been some sort of world disaster and much of the United States is underwater. And in this future world, there are monsters, and the main character is a badass monster hunter. This book has a lot of Native American influences because the main character is Navajo, and I believe its own voices. This is a buddy read that I'm doing with my cousin Shannon, actually. She recently started her very own BookTube channel, which makes me so excited. I will, of course, link her down in the description box. She reads really widely. She reads fantasy and sci-fi, but also reads a lot of like nonfiction and very thought-provoking books. And she's really reflective about the things that she reads. So if that is your style of booktuber at all, definitely go check her out. I'm also doing another buddy read right now of The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is an adult high fantasy set in a world with dragons and queendoms. That's really all I knew before deciding that I needed to read this book. I actually pre-ordered it, both on ebook and audiobook, and I'm buddy reading this with my friend Shoshana. We've only just started it, but the world is already fascinating, and I can't wait to see where the story goes. And then the last book that I'm currently reading is Peace and Turmoil by Elliot Brooks, who is a fellow booktuber and a friend of mine. This book is releasing on March 18th, and I'm so excited to see it come out into the world. This is an adult high fantasy, has a large cast of characters, and magic, and politics, and a dragon. Alright, moving on to books that I pulled out of my TBR jar. I have a TBR jar, which is right here. Inside this TBR jar, there are little origami stars with book titles on them. Every season, I pull out 3 new books out of this jar to add to my TBR. And as of 2019, I am trying to read 1 TBR jar pick a month because I wasn't reading them for a while and they kind of stacked up on me. Before I tell you about the new books I pulled out of my jar, these are the ones that are still on my TBR from before. Out of these, the ones that are higher on my priority list include The Book Thief, which I plan on reading in March as a buddy read with 2 different people. I plan to read it with Graf, who's one of my viewers, and I also plan to read it with Sophia from Sophia Reads, whose channel I will link down in the description box. I also plan to get to The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, and also The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. The remaining 2 on the leftovers list are both contemporaries that I feel like I want to wait till the summer to read. Typically, I don't pull out my TBR jar picks on camera because I like to know what I'm going to be talking about before I sit down to film, but this time I thought it would be fun to show you guys the process of me pulling them out, and so I actually pre-filmed a little clip which I will insert here so you can see the new books that I pulled out of my TBR jar. Hey guys, so I'm gonna pull out 3 stars out of my TBR jar real quick. This is what my TBR jar looks like right now. I added a bunch of books to it at the beginning of the year. In my goals video, I think I named 12 books that I was going to add to my jar, but after I added those 12 books, my jar still looked really empty. So I ended up adding a bunch more to it. So the purple stars that I added are all the ones that I added at the beginning of the year, including the ones that I mentioned in that goals video, but also other books. And then the yellow stars are actually recommendations that I received. And then the ones that have zebra stripes on them are leftovers from previous years. So I'm just gonna pick out 3. The first one I got is purple. Ooh, I got The Orphan Queen by Jodi Meadows. This is the first book in a duology that I've been wanting to read for a long time because I've enjoyed a previous series by Jodi Meadows. I actually own it. I bought this copy off of the Book Depository maybe a year ago, a little over a year ago. It's a YA high fantasy duology, and it's good that I own this because now I have a TBR jar pick that I also own, which will help me on both of my goals related to those things for 2019. Number 2, I picked out another purple star, so one I added this year. Ooh. So I picked out Planetfall by Emma Newman, which is another one that I own. So Planetfall is a science fiction book, and it is the first book in a series, but I believe these are companion series that aren't really related to each other. Maybe they take place in the same world or something. But I've heard really good things about this series from a few people, mainly Caitlin from Kitty G, but it's also not a series that a lot of people talk about, so I'm really intrigued by this one. So glad that I just pulled it out of my TBR jar, especially considering that it's another one that I own. I actually think that all of the purple stars are ones that I own. I think that's what I did when I added extra books, is I just went through my whole owned TBR and added them. Oh, got another purple one. Oh, I'm actually not that excited about this one. That's okay, maybe it'll just take me longer to read it. So the last one that I pulled out is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It is really pretty, and it's one of those soft, creamy covers. And I feel bad saying that I'm not as excited about this one out of the other ones that I pulled out, because this was a gift to me. Actually, I didn't mention, but Planetfall was also gifted to me by my sister-in-law for my birthday last year. So that's another reason why I'm excited to have pulled this out, because I always feel bad when people buy me books and I don't get to them very soon. But this one was gifted to me by my friend Shoshana. I've talked about her on my channel before because she and I do a lot of buddy reads. It's not that I don't want to read this, Shoshana. I do. It's just that because it's nonfiction, I'm never in the mood for it. So in that way, it's good that I pulled it out of my TBR jar. So now it's bumped up on my TBR and I have to read it soon-ish. I'm just not sure when that's gonna happen, but it is a book that I want to read. This is, like I said, a nonfiction book, and it's supposed to be like motivational about creativity and writing, which I haven't been motivated about writing at all lately. After NaNoWriMo, I kind of burned out, and I just haven't been excited about getting back to my story, and I'm not sure when I'm going to do that. So maybe this will help me get back in the mood to write. So those are the 3 books that I am adding to my TBR jar for this spring. Alright, moving on to the rest of my TBR. For the rest of these, I just split them up between standalones and books in a series. The first standalone on my list is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is an adult contemporary, and while this isn't something I would typically reach for, so many people have raved about this book and put it on their favorites of 2018 list. and many of those people say even if adult contemporary or this plot doesn't sound like something you would read, that you should check it out because it's really good. So I'm definitely intrigued by that. This one will actually be happening soon in March because I'm planning to do a buddy read for it with Katie from Girl About Library. I'm telling you, March is the month of buddy reads. I have so many buddy reads planned, and my TBR for March is a little bit ambitious. Next, I have The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, which is a nonfiction book about decluttering and organizing your house. I actually started reading this in February, but put it down because it wasn't on my TBR, and I thought that I was going to go over my 3-book allotment for the season, which didn't end up happening. But to give myself permission to read it, I'm putting it on this TBR. I really want to declutter my house. I've been wanting to ever since we moved into this house last fall, but I just haven't set aside the time to do that, and I'm hoping that by reading this book and watching more episodes of her really cute Netflix series, I will get motivated to get my life a little more organized. Next, I have The Dragon Princess by Cynthia Payne. This is a YA high fantasy that's actually indie published and was sent to me for free in exchange for an honest review by the author. I first heard about this book from my friend Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany, channel linked below, and this one caught my eye because I know that biology has something to do with the world building, and the author herself has a biology background. So when she reached out to me and asked if I was interested in reviewing her book, I said yes. Not only does the world building in this book interest me, it's also a standalone, and it's not often that you find YA high fantasy standalones. And now, moving on to series. I definitely have more series on my list than standalone books because well, first, I just love reading series, but second, I am trying to finish up as many series as I can this year, but I'm also starting a few series, so it's definitely a bit of a balancing act. First, I want to talk about Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. I received a free e-ARC or advanced reader copy of this from the publisher in exchange for an honest review. This book is coming out on April 2nd. I will have a review video for this going up in early April. I've been trying to avoid requesting ARCs because I just have so many things that I want to read, but this one really caught my eye. This is a YA high fantasy that is supposed to be gothic and dark, but also has a forbidden romance, which is like my favorite type of romance trope. And so I'm really looking forward to this one, and I plan to read it in March. Of course, I have to talk about the last 2 books in the Wheel of Time series. That's right, I'm going to be finishing the Wheel of Time series this spring. In March, I'm going to be reading Towers of Midnight, which is the 11th book, and in April, I'm going to be reading the final book, A Memory of Light, both by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I am really looking forward to finally finishing this amazing series, but it's also a little bittersweet because I have been leading up to this moment basically since high school. Another series I'm hoping to finish this season is The Conqueror Saga by Kiersten White. I still need to read the second book, which is called Now I Rise, which I own a physical copy of. This is actually an advanced reader copy that I got before it came out a couple summers ago. And this time, I'm being smart and I'm putting the sequel, which is called Bright We Burn, also on my TBR so I can binge them within the next 3 months and I don't have to worry about using up one of my freebies. I'm also hoping to read Midnight Star by Marie Lu, which is the 3rd and final book in the Young Elites trilogy. I've read the first 2 books in that series a couple years ago, and I really need to finish the series. I'm still very interested to find out what happens. The world building in this YA high fantasy series is so cool, and the main character is a little bit of an anti-hero, which is super interesting. Another remaining series that I'm hoping to finish off, because I just have the last book in the series, is Quintana of Charin by Melina Marchetta. This is the 3rd and final book in the Finnegan of the Rock trilogy, which I started many years ago and I haven't finished yet. I gotta say, I haven't loved this series as much as a lot of other people, but I'm still intrigued enough that I want to finish it, although I think I'm a little bit on the fence. So if you've read that series, definitely let me know what you thought of it down in the comment section. Another series I'm hoping to finish off is The Villains Duology by V.E. Schwab. So I read Vicious back in October, I think, and I enjoyed it. It was a solid 4-star read for me. And sometime late last year, the second book in the duology, Vengeful, finally came out, but I haven't picked it up yet. So I'm hoping to pick this up in the next few months and be able to check another series off my list. I also put Royal Assassin on my TBR, which is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. I'm not going to put the last book in the trilogy on my TBR because I don't think out of all of these books that I'm reading that I'm able to read both of them in the next 3 months, but I'm hoping to at least make some headway in the series in the spring. And that brings me to my last book, and that is The Blade Itself by Jo Abercrombie. This is actually the first book in a trilogy, but it's one that I have been dying to read for a while. This is the first book in the First Law trilogy, which is a adult high fantasy, grimdark fantasy that I have heard so much about. My friend Leanna from Leanna's Library absolutely loves this series, and when I visited her last fall, she had just read it and she could not stop talking about it. And ever since then, I have been dying to read it. So even though I'm trying to not start a lot of series, I knew that I wanted to read this series this year. But that's why I have so many series enders on my TBR too, because I'm hoping I can balance it all out. Alright guys, those are all 25 books that I am either currently reading or plan to read in the next 3 months. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them down in the comment section. Maybe you can help me prioritize these many books that I'm trying to read. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like bookish content. I post 1 to 2 times a week. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye. I'm a little bit, to allow a little bit of, but that's the whole point of giving, and then the ones that have like zebra stripes on them, and then the ones that have like and then the ones that have like I can't say this word. This is an adult high fantasy, this is a,